quake that's just rising out of the blue, and it's going to have a lot of people talking about it. It'll appear as this sort of like a little wave, really. It rises up and then it fades off. Our problem now is that the earthquake levels are getting to be almost as hot and continuous as we find the linguistics around things like religion and politics. So therefore, going into 2010, it was like, well, there's going to be so many damn quakes. You pick one. There's going to be so much damage. It's just going to be hard to separate the damage word to any given population or geographic area. We're faced with that same thing here relative to the U.S. There's a number of indicators for a major earthquake that causes problems to the point where we have to rely on either Mexico or Canada or Cuba, for all I know, some other nation to provide communications and transportation services and stuff because of breakdown of infrastructure here. But the geographic references are so large that it becomes meaningless to take a pick. So in this sense, I don't have anything saying, okay, in 2011 we're going to have a giant earthquake in Cascadia region. But on the other hand, it sure wouldn't surprise me. But if we have one, it won't be the only one that affects the U.S. that year.
Okay, great. And hopefully that earthquake's not the New Madrid. Another quick question. It
may very well be. I mean, we have to stop and say that there's some weird stuff going on, okay? I don't know if people follow the conspiracy threads all the way back, but if you do some of the data analysis, for instance, frequently I'll get stuff in the data and I say, well, this is too bizarre to be true, or it has no basis in a reality. I must have hit somebody's fantasy board, and we have to watch out for that kind of thing too. So I'll go and see if I can't check up on it. And so a number of years back, probably 2003 or so, I ran into this concept of this overarching document. I can't think of what it was called at the moment, but the document listed 3 specific things within it that were on the plate for the US of A. One of them was terrorism, early part of the century. The next thing was big ass storm, going to kick a bunch of people away from their houses. And the third thing was big-ass earthquake along the New Madrid. And now, here we've got a situation where, curiously, the government is hustling its butt out to spend some money which it doesn't have to locate all of these items that you would need if you were expecting a big-ass earthquake along the New Madrid. So we cannot rule that out, and to say hopefully it won't be that, we really actually have to change our language and our thinking and say there's a lot of hints, there's evidence coming out from the government that they certainly expect it, so we should as well. And if I lived in that region, I would be very paranoid because it's not built to deal with earthquakes. Many of the buildings are going to collapse in an instant. The people need to really start examining the infrastructure around them because the government is basically what they say about politicians, that they never build a law, never make a law they don't intend to use, and they never spend money on items they don't intend to use. So if they buy Jeeps ahead of a war, a war is coming. If they buy FEMA survival stuff and that kind of stuff ahead of an earthquake, an earthquake's coming. I would suspect 2011.
Yeah, maybe they've been reading Edgar Casey's maps, because that looks like definitely something that might happen if New Madrid went off. Just another question, Clif, in regards to final question on the terror entity. You mentioned in your data, in your reports, you mentioned that numbers are prescient, especially if they come out as words. And you've had a few numbers in the past. Global reduction in oceans of 68%. The ill winds causing 1.289 billion people to disappear, I guess, to die, and 200 million people in the North American populace becoming refugees fleeing north. Were those numbers still in your last run?
It doesn't work that way. The data sets that those numbers appeared in as support are continuing to receive support. So it's not as though we pick up the same numbers each and every time. Rather, items are picked up as a supporting aspect attribute to a particular archetype or descriptor set, and they're put into that set. As long as that set continues to grow and meet certain conditions, it's a pending event. Once it stops growing, we know we're very close to how soon it will manifest. And so the larger ones, though, or larger sets, continue to grow even as they are manifesting, just because they're so damn big. And that's kind of what we have in that situation. So the long answer is basically, yes, those sets are continuing to receive support, and it's a nasty time coming.
Okay, Cliff. Thank you. What we might do is we'll just take a quick 3 minute break. We'll fill up our coffee jugs, and we'll catch back up in about 3 minutes.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, welcome back to the WebBot Forum. We've got Clif. Hi. Cliff, we'll continue on now with the next set of questions, and we'll probably skip straight to the US population questions. Cliff, over all the SHAPE reports and the last dozen interviews, you've always held the belief that the powers that were would not launch a false flag and or world war without first waiting for the currency destruction. Are you still of this opinion, and what does the last data say?
I'm still of this opinion, and the last data suggests that from the 14th, in that 63-day period of release language, something occurred which we have yet to see, which it has a high visibility, but it hasn't come out yet, so I don't know when that will appear. But something occurred that took away a built-up level of emotional energy that the powers that be had. So my opinion is now even more reinforced that their efforts are going to, or their ability to, their energies, their ability to actually achieve their goals has been reduced. That may make them more desperate, but it will make them less successful in the end. I'm really curious myself to see what it was that actually reduced their built-up emotional energy. For instance, the riots in Egypt and stuff are merely a symptom, an expression of this. I don't know if it's like Jay Widener said, the real powers that be have gotten in their spaceships and taken off for their hidey holes in Mars, leaving the local buffoons in charge. But the data would certainly support something even as outlandish as that, simply because of the change in the nature of the powers that be themselves. In support of that, somebody was kind enough to send me an interview that occurred yesterday with Henry Kissinger on PBS, and you listen to his language. And then I've also seen a recent excerpt of a statement by Zbigniew Brzezinski's cadre. I don't know actually who made the statement itself within the White House that suggests that we are indeed looking at a level of ineffectiveness or creep in the powers that be that is to our favor. Again, it may make them more desperate. They may trot out their false flag or threat of a war, but I just don't know anymore whether they even have the wherewithal themselves to do that. I mean, the emotional energy, so to speak, knowing the effect it's going to have in the blowback. It's kind of like, say that let's just make some estimates here. Say that 3% of the entire US of A populace is aware of the concept of Project Bluebeam. And then they actually do use Project Bluebeam. Well, it would be basically laughed out and ratted out and ineffective within days, and would have a blowback on them that would be disproportionate to the amount of energy they put into it, but directly proportionate to the amount of the populace that then became aware of what a scam the whole thing was. So they dare not use Project Bluebeam, and they will be unsurprised if they did use it to find exactly that effect, I think, and therefore they won't use it. So I think we're actually now entering that period of time when events are going to be a little bit too chaotic for the powers that be to even stay in sync, so to speak. Again, watch out for the odd little nuke, but it doesn't look like there's going to be a nuclear war kind of a thing let loose. Now, the currency issue is, after that goes, again, they're not in the same position they were even a year ago relative to the built-up emotional energy. They lost something occurred, and they lost the emotional energy that they built up since the early 2000s. It could be that it was the WikiLeaks, and if that's the case, then the next batch, if it comes out such that it's synchronized around March 25th, then that could account for the big push down into release language again. Again, from the 25th of March all the way through to October is not a good time for officialdom at all. and they're going to lose a bunch more emotional energy during that period.
Okay, Sandra, I believe you have a question for Clif.
Yes, I do. Clif, do you have any further information on riots and unrest for the European nations? Specifically, are the riots of 2010 a fulfillment of the linguistics or a precursor of more to come?
They only have brought in about 28 or 29% of the linguistics that we had, so I suspect it's merely Act 1 in a probably 2 or 3 act play.
And I have another question that would go under global. As far as back in the Alta report, you were talking about military possibly being stranded overseas.
We still have that, yes.
Yeah, with the Egyptian situation, could this be part of the linguistics for having soldiers stranded abroad? I'm thinking about the Marines at the embassy as well as the civilians that are having problems getting out of Egypt.
It would seem so, but no. The linguistics that we had relative to the stranded soldiers were specific to a number of conditions relative to the dollar itself. And we haven't seen those conditions yet. And the type of strandings that we have in most or many cases of this, they were not in any way at risk of problems from the local populace. In some areas that was true, but in the main, even those let me put it this way: in the main, in the linguistics, even those military bases where the inhabitants would not be at risk from the local populace were still distressed because they were not able to get home. So it'd be like now we meet some of the linguistics with the people in Egypt not being able to get out. However, our linguistics would also describe places like Germany where the Germans were not rioting against the local Americans, but nonetheless the local Americans had no money and had to get home. Make sense?
Yes, it does. Clif, if you don't mind, one more question. And this is regarding the tainted meat and the bad foods that have been coming up for years in the linguistics.
Yeah.
What I'm wondering as far as the meat is if this is commercial meat only, or will homegrown organically raised meat also be affected?
It seems to be a distributed. It seems it involves the linguistics that involve the distribution system. So I would think the former and not the latter, because the linguistic sets involve transportation, the storage and distribution, and affect a large segment of the populace. So I wouldn't suspect it would be the organic or the homegrown.
Oh,
you see, the way this stuff works. We might, as I say, it's basically a numbers game. At some point in the linguistics, in each and every one of these linguistics sets, you go, I say down, it's just a choice of a language, but I go down a chain of support, and then I drop into detail that is so vast that picking out any word to be meaningful is really just a real guess, whereas slightly above that, the odds really increase that we're going to be reasonably accurate in picking out significant words. So when we were dealing with the bad foods that have been showing up for a long time, we look for differentiation points that would say, here is something that is key. So we use those as our temporal markers or manifestation clues. And in this case, the key element we found was that the transportation system was going to be involved. Yet another reason to, grow your own.